a set of stories that are told that just are beloved. I'm guessing that you all have either families stories that you tell or that you love to listen to from your grandparents, aunts and uncles. Some of my favorite stories come from my grandmother, and especially when she talks about her brother would be my great uncle, Uncle Wesley, and he was, especially according to her stories, a tremendous man. Her father, their father, was known to be the town drunk, and one story she tells one particular time is he had drunk away all of their money, and her brother Wesley had enough and went to the local bar, the South Tavern in Homer, Illinois, and literally tore the place apart with his bare hands and put an end to at least that bar being a place where my great grandfather could waste away all of their money. And it's pretty crazy that even to this day, Homer is a dry town. And to it all together. That's right. That's right. Don't exactly. I wish he could. He was also, Ted, you'll appreciate this, a captain in the United States Air Force, and became a World War II hero. He flew the P-38 Lightning fighter plane, and he was finally, during his 51st mission, was shot down over Germany. And to hear the stories of his life, I love. He was a Golden Glove boxer out of Chicago back in the 30s. I mean, he would have probably boxed against some really famous Joe Louis type boxers who came out of the Chicago Golden Glove era, yeah. And fought against some of those greats that we would know of in boxing history. But also, so he was a war hero. He was a hero to our family. He was, of course, a hero to my grandmother. I loved hearing her stories because, not just because of the stories themselves, but because he made a choice to change the cycle that my great-grandfather had established for his family, and it really sent what he did sent my grandmother and our family on a very different trajectory. But that's the beauty of our family stories, isn't it? I mean, knowing where we came from really kind of informs who we are today, and where we'll be tomorrow as we make choices based on whether it's our past or the past of our family. We make choices every single day based on who we're going to be tomorrow. I tell my kids often, sometimes I think maybe I have to tell them this more often than I think I should, but the choice you made right now, even though it was a mistake, not the most important decision you've ever made in your life. What's the most important decision that you'll ever have to make after you've just made a mistake? What's your most important decision? It's the next one, right? We have choices to make based on our past and our future. Sometimes our family stories maybe cause a little bit of embarrassment. Maybe you got some black sheeps in your family, and sometimes those stories get told. Sometimes you wish that you could retell those stories a little differently. But that's who we are. Our stories make us who we are today. It's that's the beauty of the Bible too, isn't it? God shares the story of His story, the life of His people, warts and all. Good stories, bad stories, and He shares who His people were and who we are today. We get to see the real story of God's people, and He is shedding light on who we are. That's why the Bible is so important to us, because it really shares the story of all of us. It helps us understand where we've come from and even where we're going. From the very first words of Genesis to the very last words of Revelation, we get to see where we've come from and where we're going. And the story that we're going to take a really focus on this morning comes from Joshua chapter 2. It's the story of Rahab. A story almost kind of hidden away, tucked away in the first few chapters of the book of Joshua, but in so many ways, as we'll see, it's also our story. Her story is our story. It's one of the most fascinating stories of this whole exodus into the land of Canaan part of the Bible. It really gives us a good sneak peek into Jesus and who Jesus would become, and kind of this thread, this red thread, if you will, that connects Genesis to Revelation. We get to see, even in the life of Rahab and her story, we get a sneak peek of Jesus. Rahab, we find, becomes the grandmother of King David. And her story, we get to see how faith and salvation are put clearly on display, giving us this picture of Jesus to come. And before this, before her story kind of comes into the forefront, the Israelites, here they are. Remember, we've talked about this over the last few weeks. Here they are. They stand right with their toes on the edge of the Jordan River, right? They're waiting. They're ready to take the land of Canaan. 40 years have passed of wandering in the desert because they were disobedient and not faithful. God had told them once before, you go into the land of Canaan. Remember, they sent 12 spies. 10 were bad. How many were good? 2 were good, Joshua and Caleb. And now God had them wander for 40 years until that generation of adults, military men, were passed. And now Joshua, the torch has been passed, leadership torch has been passed on to him, and he's ready to take the Israelites into Egypt. So into the land of Canaan. In Joshua chapter 2, beginning verse 1, we see that there is this most unusual, most unexpected person standing between the Israelites moving into Canaan and certain death. It's none other than a prostitute by the name of Rahab. Let's take a look. Joshua 2, beginning verse 1. Then Joshua, son of Nun, secretly sent 2 spies from Shittim. Now, I kind of think here, Joshua learned a valuable lesson. He was one of the 2 that were good 40 years ago, and he decided that they didn't need 12 spies. Just 2 is all they needed to go in and spy this time. He picked 2 that he knew would be obedient to God, and he told them to go look over the land, he said, especially Jericho. So they went and entered the house of a prostitute named Rahab and stayed there. The king of Jericho was told, "Look, some of the Israelites have come here tonight to spy out the land." And so the king of Jericho sent this message to Rahab: "Bring out the men who came to you and entered your house, because they have come to spy out the whole land." This is the beginning of Rahab's story. She is given a command by the king of Jericho to give up these 2 spies. She's here with a choice to be made. Really, I think it's important for us to notice right up front how her story and our story are the same. When God looks down on us, he looks at us the same as he did Rahab. I understand that I look through the crowd, and I'm sure none of you are prostitutes or have been. Okay, that's good. I don't know why you're laughing, Phil. Okay, we'll leave it at that. We're not prostitutes. I understand that. I'm glad for that. And yet, at the same time, we not faithful to a faithful God. And we have adulterated ourselves with sin. If you are part of the body of Jesus Christ, you are, in a very real sense, the bride of Jesus Christ, and yet at the same time, we've found ourselves prostituting ourselves out to the gods of our culture, in our society, the same way, in a very similar way, Rahab prostituted herself physically. We prostitute ourselves spiritually, and we are unfaithful to a very faithful God. And in reality, my story starts out the same place that we find Rahab. Your story starts the same way that Rahab's story here starts, in God's story. You're a sinner in need of the love and the grace of God. Period. One Bible scholar tells us that this story, the story of Rahab, has embarrassed some theologians, and they have tried to soften the situation by arguing that Rahab was only an innkeeper, not a prostitute. But he says the New Testament is clear, has clear references to her. Hebrews chapter 11, verse 31, James chapter 2, verse 25, and both of these indicate that she was an immoral woman. Period. Why is it that sometimes we want to soften the stories of our past? We're embarrassed. Maybe there's a black sheep in your family that sometimes you want to soften their story because it's an embarrassment to the family, it's an embarrassment to the name. And yet, in this case in particular, I think that understanding the reality that she was a prostitute, she was an immoral sinner, I think it's better. I think it's better to see her, knowing what she becomes, the grandmother of King David, the line of Jesus. I think it's better that we see who she is for who she is because of the power of God at work in her life and the life of the Israelites. What we see here is God's love toward humanity of sinners like you and me. It shows that God really does take us where we are, and He loves us the way we are, and He can use us where we are for who we are, and yet He doesn't want to leave us in that place as well. His love overwhelms who we were and makes us who He wants us to be, who He created us to be in the first place. I'd say, just like God, it's just like God, as you see throughout the Scriptures, especially in the New Testament, it's just like God to take a sinner and make her a hero in His story. It's good news for us, isn't it? I mean, our past, you could tell stories about your past, I could tell stories about my past, and are you glad that you can be forgiven for your past? That you are forgiven for who you were, you are forgiven for what you do outside of God's will now. We promise that we can be forgiven for what we will certainly do. It takes us and transforms us for His kingdom's sake, no matter what our past is like. It's good news for us. Our past can be forgiven. That we can move forward from our past, knowing what God has done for us to prepare for us a future because of the transformation He's making in us now. In the 2nd century, one of our early church fathers, Origen is his name, he wrote these words. He says, "As the first Joshua sent his spies before him, they were received into the harlot's house. So the second Joshua of course, is the Hebrew word Yeshua, which is the name, as Jesus' name was changed from Yeshua to Jesus through the Greek language. And so the second Joshua, Jesus, sent his forerunners, whom the publicans and the harlots gladly received. How many times did you see Jesus being told about him? He was found in the house of tax collectors and sinners, and criticized for it. I love how Matthew describes in his gospel from his perspective in Matthew chapter 9, beginning verse 10, while Jesus was having dinner at Matthew's house. Who Matthew was a tax collector. It says, many tax collectors and sinners came and ate with him and his disciples. When the Pharisees saw this, they asked his disciples, why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners? On hearing this is what Jesus said. It's not healthy to need a doctor, but the sick. And then he challenges on the Pharisees with this. But go and learn what this means. I desire mercy, not sacrifice. For I have not come to call the righteous, but sinners. How many of us before Christ were righteous? How many of us were healthy and well spiritually, not in need of a doctor? Jesus came for us, sinners in need of his grace. Do you suppose that God chose Rahab because he knew her heart? I mean, I think about her situation as a prostitute, and I just wonder if she was happy and satisfied with her lot in life. If maybe in this moment the timing was just right, where she was contemplating and desiring a real change in her life. She knew she needed something different, but she didn't know how to get out of it. See, a prostitute in those days, a lot of times, they didn't choose to be a prostitute. It was chosen for them. Maybe she didn't get married. Maybe she couldn't have children. Maybe she was rejected by men. Whatever the reason, then it became no longer her choice, but she was chosen by the leaders of this particular community that she would be a prostitute. Can you imagine having that life being chosen for you? And yet here she was. She knew that this wasn't what she was made for. She knew that there was something greater and better out there for her. She wanted something different. But how many times when you think about, I need to stop this, it's like we make New Year's resolutions to eat healthier, to lose weight, to diet, to exercise. And yet, once you make that decision, you're scared to actually go through it. Because you don't know, I mean, it's going to be hard work. You don't know, will I succeed? Will I fail? How do I move forward with this particular decision? To get out of prostitution, she had no place to go. How was she going to get out of it? There's fear on the other side. I don't know what life is going to be like if I give this up. And so her heart, maybe she was in turmoil, maybe she was really desiring internally this change of life for herself, but she didn't know what to do. She didn't know how. And it was in this moment, being trapped in her own sin, she wanted out, and God stepped in at just the right time to provide a way, to provide something better, something more for her. I wonder how many of us are still slaves to sin, stuck in this rut. Whatever particular sin has just got a grip on your life, and you know that there is something better. You don't know how to get rid of it. You don't know how to stop saying yes to the sin. It's got you shackled to it. And you don't know how to begin saying know, but you know that there's more. You know that there's something better than this life that you're trapped in. God put that desire in you. When He knit you together in your mother's womb, He made it so that you knew, that you would know that there's something more, that you were meant and made for something more than the sin that has enslaved you, that has you bound and shackled to death and not life. You have this innate desire to seek and find God. You have this innate desire for Him to heal your brokenness, to break your bondage to sin. Rahab knew that there was something better right in front of her when these spies came walking into Jerusalem and found themselves in her home. Don't you wonder, why did they pick a home of a prostitute to find refuge in the first place? You ever wonder, why did they choose to go to a prostitute's house? I don't know the answer to that because it doesn't really explain that, but I just wonder, maybe the obvious answer to that would be because that's where God led them, right? Because He knew what she needed and what she wanted. He knew her heart. So God led them there. Maybe they went there because, well, they're spies. Where are you going to find the opportunity to hear men talk about things that they wouldn't ordinarily talk about? Maybe it was a place like this. I don't know. I don't know why they chose to go to Rahab's place, but they did. Because God directed and appointed them to do so. Verse 4, how her story then begins to unfold by God's design. Verse 4, but the woman had taken the two men and hidden them, and she said, yes, the men came to me, but I didn't know where they had come from. At dusk, when it was time to close the city gate, the men left, and I don't know which way they went. And so she says, go after them quickly, you may catch up with them. But, verse 6, but she had actually taken them up to the roof and hidden them under the stalks of flax that she had laid out on the roof. So the men set out in pursuit of the spies on the road that leads to the fords of the Jordan. And as soon as the pursuers had gone out, the gate was shut. Before the spies lay down for the night, she went up on the roof and said to them, I know that the Lord has given this land to you, and that a great fear of you has fallen on us, so that all who live in this country are melting in fear because of you. Notice the contrast in the way she was responding about how the people of Canaan felt about the people of Israel. 40 years ago, the 10 spies came back and said, we're melting in fear because of them. They're giants in this land. And they were afraid of the people of Canaan. And yet, if they had listened to the people of Canaan, they probably would have said the very same thing that Rahab is saying. We are melting in fear of you. Why do I think that they would have said the same thing 40 years ago about the people of Israel? It's because of the story that she has to tell about them. Listen to what she says beginning in verse 10. She says, we have heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea. She takes it all the way back to the Exodus. For you, when you came out of Egypt, and what you did to Sihon and Og, the two kings of the Amorites east of the Jordan, whom you completely destroyed. Do you understand? If they would have been obedient in the first place, the people were melting in fear of them then too. And thankfully, Rahab delivered the message clearly to them in this place. Verse 11, she said, when we heard of it, our hearts melted, and everyone's courage failed because of you. For the Lord your God is God in heaven above and on the earth below. Now then, please swear to me by the Lord that you will show kindness to my family because I have shown kindness to you. Give me a sure sign that you will spare the lives of my father and my mother and my brothers, sisters, and all who belong to them, and that you will save us from death. Our lives for your lives. The men assured her, if you don't tell what we're doing, we will treat you kindly and faithfully when the Lord gives us the land. Like Rahab, faced with the opportunity to have a choice. Our stories involve a choice. Do we have the courage to choose what is right, even when it may be more comfortable to stay where we are, to do what we've been doing? If we feel safer doing, just going along with the flow of life, doing what everybody else is doing, finding the safety of our peer group that's involved with the same stuff that we are we willing to have the courage to stand out against what we know to be wrong and to stand up for what we know to be right? Let's take a minute to put ourselves in Rahab's shoes. She's faced with a decision, a choice, right? She could have turned the spies away. She could have tuned them out. She didn't have to help them. The safe choice would have been really just to stay out of the line of fire. But given a choice between the side of the Lord and the other side, the losing side, she chose the Lord's side. And I wonder if something, whatever was stirring in her, and like we talked about a moment ago, I wonder if here she was ready for something else, ready to be someone else. Maybe like someone else. Ready to be someone else. Something else. Do you desire to be somewhere else in your life yet? I mean, has the sin in your life got you finally to a place yet where you say, I've had enough? Do you want to be free? Set free from what we perceive to be our lot in life? Rahab had the courage to step out of her life of bondage to sin. Do you know that our God is a God who specializes in setting us free? That's who He is. That's His heart's desire for you, to free you from what you perceive to be your lot in life and offer us freedom in Jesus Christ. And this may sound oversimplified, but it really does come down to a choice. Our choice. God's not going to drag you or make you make a choice for Him. He's not going to force you out of your bondage to sin. It's something that He says, I lay before you a choice like I did with Rahab. You can listen to the king of Jericho, who is the prince of our world today, the one who would lead us into sin and keep us in bondage to our prostitution. Or you can know that I am the Lord of Lords. And I am your King. And I want to set you free. Maybe our choice has never been so clear cut. Maybe you were raised in a home where God has always been the focus, and now you have to choose for yourself your story, like my story. It involves a choice. Choose to be fully committed to Jesus Christ, or one foot in the world, one foot in God's world. Our God is a God who loves us, even in our condition of sin, even in our spiritual unhealth. He loves us, and He doesn't want to leave us there. He doesn't want to leave us straddling. He doesn't want to leave us if we've got both feet in our world of sin. He doesn't want to leave us there. He doesn't want to leave us defeated like the people of Israel who were destined for destruction. He does not want to leave you destined for destruction. He wants to deliver you. God, just as the story goes on in Joshua 2, where they say, leave this scarlet cord out your window, and when we attack, we'll know that that's your home and you'll be safe. We make an oath with you, just like God has offered us this same scarlet cord to hang from our window as a sign that we are bound by the covenant that he made to us through blood, the scarlet blood of Jesus Christ. Like Rahab, we each have a decision. We have a choice to make. Sin or salvation. Death or life. What will you choose? Choose life today. Choose Jesus. Choose him because he loves you. And his promise is, if you choose me, if you follow me, if you give your life fully and completely to me, I will break the bondage of your sin. And I will give you life for eternity. We can choose him today. Let's pray. Father, I thank you so much. Just like Rahab, you've given us a choice.